Welcome to the Scale Up Valley podcast, where we bring the best founders and investors to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is a very special one. His name is Adrian or Adrian, depending on where you are coming from, and is the president of Endeavor. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Oh, Mike, thanks to you, and thanks for having me.
It's really a pleasure, and let's start to get to know more about you and why this joke with Adrian and Adrian.
I guess the joke comes because of my background. I mean, I have parents that are one is American, one is Spanish. So
I didn't know that. Okay,
I grew up with both. Being called both names. So Adrian and Adrian. As I said, if you're on the street and you call both names, I will turn around with both names.
Exactly. But tell me more about your story and how you ended joining Endeavor.
Perfect. So let's see. Well, I started. I can go back in time to the back in the Stone Age, but I started. I studied political science with conviction because I thought of policy and thinking about ways of having an impact in society. You know. But worked in that very early on in my university years, became very disillusioned, and I went into finance because I think that we all have to do that. So I went into finance, worked there for a couple of years, realized that was not my thing, still wanted to figure out what that impact could be, and I ended up joining the foreign trade department in Spain. I did the exam, passed the exam, did that. That's what actually got me to the US. I lived in the US, working at the Spanish Chamber of Commerce for a while. And after that, I decided that I wanted to stay in the US, and I started looking for a job here. And I guess that my career really started there. Being in New York, I was able to find a job at The Economist, Economist newspaper group. And I was very, very lucky to have amazing bosses, a boss and several bosses after that bet on me and helped me grow and helped me develop a career. So I did that for a bit over 5 years. And then I very seamlessly kind of got a call to set up the communications team for Latin America at JP Morgan. And it was kind of like an easy transition. It seemed like it has nothing to do, but it was a very easy transition because it was a bunch of the same people that I was working with at The Economist, media, journalists, etc. But I was just doing it now from the corporate side. So it was fairly easy because it was doing a different angle, but doing very much the same, and absolutely loved working at JP Morgan. So I was back to finance, which I said I wouldn't do, but it was a very different area of finance. Loved it. Again, was very lucky with the bosses that I had. And was loving every minute of it, doing what I really thought I did best. And I got a call if I wanted to join Endeavor. Endeavor had been an organization that I'd been exposed to for many years, but I'd never really thought about joining the organization this way. And they were about to launch an office in Spain. So they called me. They were going to launch the office. At the beginning, I was kind of like reluctant, but then I immediately grabbed onto the opportunity.
And at the time you were in New York, not in Madrid.
That's right. At the time I was in New York, it actually meant relocating to Spain, which was actually the reason why I was kind of reluctant. No, so it was one of those things of it was 11 years in the US, I had to move back. But I always thought that if I wanted to move back, I wanted to move back to something that had an impact. So and I truly believed in what I'd seen with the model of Endeavor. And sure enough, I'm so glad that I did it because I got to live in Spain for 5 years. I got to see the impact that Endeavor can have in an ecosystem. And 5 years into that job, I got a call from Global if I wanted to come and take the current position as president. And that's what I've been doing for practically 4 years now. That actually also meant me being back in New York. So I had to move back to New York. So it's been a back and forth. And New York, Madrid, Madrid, New York, New York, Madrid, and now New York again.
And amazing story because you had very early on an angle of understanding the European market, also understanding the US market and the Latin market, given your role in one of those financial institutions. So also a global outlook about what was going on in the different markets that get you ready to lead a global organization as Endeavor. So it's incredible, as we were discussing before the show. I know the brand for a very long time, but I would never imagine that it's Endeavor already has 25 years. I always like to share Scale Up Valley will turn 10 in Jan. And I will say at the time there was very few content available about scaling up. So it was all about starting up. So I imagine 25 years ago, not 10 years ago. It was really a pioneer, a super ad of its time. But for the ones who didn't have the pleasure yet to get in touch with Endeavor, if you could just give us an overview about what Endeavor is, the mission, the vision, etc., that would be great.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, right now, everyone talks about entrepreneurship and scale up, and we understand this concept. But the reality is that Linda Rotenberg and Peter Kellner were the co-founders of Endeavor, were true visionaries when they started this. And imagine starting this in an emerging market when people were not really talking about entrepreneurship. I mean,
that's point.
Emerging. So they're starting an emerging market, speaking about entrepreneurship. I can't imagine those conversations being easy. No, I mean, and the challenge that they must have faced in the early days. Again, I only joined 9 years ago, which seems like a lot, but actually the brand was already set, that the fundamentals were already there, the processes were already established. No, but the first few years must have been quite amazing to have the conversation. But to be able to explain in a nutshell what we do, what we are, what we do, we're a nonprofit that focuses on selecting what we call high impact entrepreneurs. So to your point of what you covered in Scale Up Valley, we're about scale up as well. So that's what we're selecting. We're not selecting startups, we're selecting scale ups, and those scale ups are companies that are at the growth stage, they're at an inflection point, and that's where we can really make a difference in them. The reason why we choose these companies and the reason why we do what we do is because we truly believe, we don't only believe, we actually know with data that the entrepreneurs that we're supporting are the ones that are actually going to be strengthening and building the ecosystems, and not only that, the ecosystems and the economy of those local ecosystems in which we operate. And the reality is that it's much deeper than what we think about or what we see at the early stages. I mean, when we analyze entrepreneurs, we could go the easy route and think about direct and indirect jobs that they're creating. And it's fine, it's measurable, it has an impact, and it's amazing, and the wealth is being created, and that's great. But there's a second tier, which is much more impactful, which is the multiplier effect, which is the influence that the entrepreneurs have in their ecosystems. And it's much broader. So you might have a company that's formed, an entrepreneur, that's formed a company that becomes a unicorn, and that's amazing. But at the same time, that entrepreneur is actually set up a team. That team has actually seen entrepreneurship from day one. They decide they also want to become entrepreneurs. When they have a liquidity event or some kind of the mafia effects, exactly. When they have a liquidity event, they start investing in their next generation. They are entrepreneurs themselves, so they're mentoring the next generation. And also they become these role models, these public figures that are speaking at different conferences, that are being interviewed. But that inspires the next generation. That's like, if this guy from this place with this background could do it, so can I. And that multiplier effect becomes much more broader. So it's not only the direct impact the company has, but it's that multiplier that the companies have. So to the mafia that you're saying, think of the PayPal case and the PayPal mafia. Everything that came from.
And it's incredible. We already see this effect in emerging markets, I would say even in the first or second generations, a little bit behind the ecosystems like the US or Silicon Valley or even New York. But already having the first and the second generation coming into business, it's amazing to see the multiplier effect that you were talking about. It's for the ones who are passionate about ecosystem building, like ourselves. It's really great to see.
It's fascinating. The only thing that we have to notice is it does take time. This is not something that's done overnight. I mean, you select entrepreneurs, you support the entrepreneurs, you walk with them along the way, and as you walk with them, certain parts of that multiplier journey become reality. So their teams, a key person in their team leaves and sets up a company, and then it's a journey. It could take a decade. No, you're not going to see the multiplier effect, or maybe 5 years, but you're not going to see the multiplier effect overnight. So we have a data team that does all the analysis of that of the data that we have, and also a lot of interviewing the ecosystems, and we're able to actually map the multiplier effect now.
That is amazing. And something that is also quite amazing is the evolution of the geographical footprint of Endeavor. Can you kind of walk us through what has been kind of the evolution? Now Endeavor is almost everywhere, or globally, even in emerging markets, within developed markets like second tier or third tier cities in the US, in some regions of Europe as well. But better than me, you can share with the audience what has been that evolution.
So not everywhere yet, but yes, definitely we have a large footprint. We're now in 41 markets, and when we say markets, to what you're mentioning of the second or third tier cities in the US, we do have some clusters in the U.S. in which we're also present. So we have an office in Louisville, in Detroit, in Buffalo, in Arkansas. So we have different presence within the U.S. And then the rest of the markets that we have are either what we call emerging markets or economies in crisis. No, so think of countries like Spain, in which there's a huge gap. There's a huge unemployment situation right now. So we're always looking for companies in which we can actually bridge that divide, and figure out how we can actually bring a bit of the, in essence, bring a bit of the Silicon Valley model to the markets in which we're operating, no, and bringing the connections and the network effects and all of that, no. But as of today, it started in Latin America. This was 25 years ago. So the first countries that we started in are Chile and Argentina and Chile, depending on who you speak with. And we expanded obviously first into Latin America, then to Africa, then Southeast Asia, then Europe, Middle East. So it's been a gradual expansion to get to where we are today. As you said, in the US, and we just recently also opened a year and a bit ago, we actually opened up in Canada. So we actually now have presence in North America, Latin America, Europe, mainly Southern Europe and Eastern Europe and Ireland as well. We have in Africa, we have the Maghreb region on the one side. So we have presence in Algiers and Morocco, and then we have Sub-Saharan Africa. We have Middle East, and then we have Asia with a focus mainly on APAC, but we also have just opened Pakistan. No? So we have South Asia, and then we have Southeast Asia too.
Love it. And something that just came up to mind when you were speaking, of course, and that's the purpose of a nonprofit. You want the nonprofit to not be needed to exist in the future. I think that by definition, of course, there are always so many problems to solve that this day will never come. But I would say the dream when we start a nonprofit is to come to a moment that the nonprofit doesn't need to exist anymore, because the ecosystems have evolved and now they are at the state of the art. I know that this is kind of an utopia. There is always so much to do, but I was just thinking about Spain, the example that we were talking about, and definitely now Madrid and Barcelona are across the top 10 hubs in Europe, with more investment in startups in different cycles. When it happens, you start focusing yourself more in other ecosystems, or you keep doubling down on the ecosystems that matured with your impact. What is your thought process about that?
You're absolutely right. We always want to analyze the market and think, is our job done? But I always think that there's always a job to be done. No, I mean, it is true that you might see, like you just mentioned in Spain, you might see these big hubs of Madrid, Barcelona. No, but are we tackling the hubs only in certain verticals? Are there other verticals that we could tackle? No, so that's the first thing, looking into the verticals. No, and then within the hubs, are we always only attacking those hubs, or are there other hubs? Because we have noticed that there are other hubs. I mean, we have in southern Spain, you have a hub in Malaga, you have Seville. In northern Spain, you have the Basque region. You also have you have in the coastal area, you also have Valencia. No, so we do have these little other poles of entrepreneurship, no? And I think that we also have to double down on those. It's not only focusing on the main hubs, but the other things. We have some very surprising and impressive and successful cases in Spain in particular, which I know well, in cities that you would never think of, that you would never imagine that you have a successful tech entrepreneur coming from a city that is not really in any tech map, no? So I think that we always find a way in which we can fine-tune our mission and double down in the countries in which we operate.
Yeah. Do you have any insights about why did Endeavor decided to start with LATAM? It was because it was closer in the same time zone of the US. Any insights on why LATAM to start? This is just a curiosity.
It would be a great interview question for our founders. I've heard the story, I've read the book, and I know them well. And I speak I work them with Linda intensely, but it still doesn't mean that I know the story as well as they do. But to the extent of what I know, the reality is that she'd actually moved to Argentina, and she was trying to figure out this way in which there were people that were knowledgeable of entrepreneurship, knowledgeable in tech, and she wanted to figure out a way in which those people could actually thrive and become these successful entrepreneurs, the same way that she was seeing it in her home country. No, so she saw this in the U.S. happening, but she didn't see it in LATAM. So she was by chance in Buenos Aires when that happened, and that's when she realized there is a model here, no? And if you fast forward a few months, or she actually selected the first Endeavor entrepreneur, and it was a very successful story from it's Witness Casares of Patagon.com, no, which is a very successful fintech story in Latin America. But he was one of our first Endeavor entrepreneurs, no? So it was actually trying to figure out, how can we bridge that gap? How can we actually bring the connections and bring the resources so that right entrepreneurs can actually also scale their companies internationally? This became a huge successful case, and he ended up selling Patagon.com to Santander before the dot-com bubble. But it was like the precursor of what was to come. And that was like the thought of why we took it to other markets. But the reality is that they were present in those markets. They were active in those markets. That's where they saw the first activity. And that's why we launched in Argentina and Chile, no? And also for that reason, you see that the initial expansion is within LATAM, but that's when we realized this model is very easily replicable in other places. No? At the beginning, it's scalable, exactly. But it seemed that this is a model. Is this a model that only works in Argentina? No, it works in Argentina and Chile. Is this a model that only works in 2 markets? No, it actually works across the region. Is this a model that only works in the region? No, it works worldwide. No, and if you look at worldwide, then you say, is it a model that only works in emerging markets? No, it also works in economies in crisis. No, that's where we go into Greece, to Spain.
That is amazing.
No, so it's always figuring out how to scale this model. No.
Exactly, and scaling also the exponential impact on the different ecosystems, and kind of creating a world where wherever you are, you can build a great company. You have the resources and the option to build it. Now it's on your grid, and the play field is kind of leveled for everybody in the planet. So again, I think there is a lot to do in that regard. Right? And as you said, that's what Linda saw when moving into Argentina or Chile. As there is this discussion, as you were saying, and these are entrepreneurs like the ones I see in the US, and there is no reason why they are not able to build great companies if they have the same context, right?
And it's exactly your point of you mentioning of leveling the playing field. I mean, that's the essence of what Endeavor wants to do, is exactly that. No, it's kind of like, focus on your company. We have the network.
Exactly. Love it. And the network is quite amazing. I think that's something that is quite inspirational. As you said, I think that the first time that I get to know about Endeavor was a TED Talk gave by Linda. Not sure how many years ago I saw it. And then you were able to, and she was already able to attract at that time very influential people around her cause, the mission, the vision. So she was very vocal and very visionary. Nowadays, there are people on your board like Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn. Not sure if you want to add other names that are in the network today at Endeavor.
Yeah, well, and our global board is, I mean, you have Reid, you have Nick Bain, you have Matt Harris, you have Javier Livan, Guillaume Poussaz, Nicolas Secasi. I mean, really, the board is amazing. I'm not going to say more names because I'm going to leave more people, and that way
exactly.
I'm going to get in trouble for sure. But any one from the board is amazing and impressive, and adds so much value. Conversation is eye-opening. No, plus they're also very well connected. So if you need anything, they're always 1 degree or 2 degrees away from some of them in connection. But if you take that to the local level as well, our local boards are just as impressive. I mean, it's the key business leaders from an ecosystem. It's the key entrepreneurial players, the entrepreneurs themselves as well, part of the ecosystem as well. So you have the most relevant figures in each ecosystem that are part of our board. So we have roughly, I'm saying 400 board members. We have roughly 3,000 mentors in our base, and roughly 5,000 entrepreneurs. No, so it's a network of close to 10,000 people that are just dedicated to we can actually leverage for this. And then to the dedication of the people, we have 500 employees worldwide. So to be able to provide those connections, we have 500 full-time employees that are actually making all of this possible, all these connections possible.
Quite impressive. And there is also something that it seems that was created some years ago, but it already has 10 years, which is the fund, the Endeavor Catalyst. Would you like to share more with entrepreneurs about the fund? Yeah,
so you were mentioning that the dream of a fund is to become superfluous after a fund. Sorry, if a nonprofit is to become superfluous after a time. No, so you're setting it up, hoping to be able to solve the problem. At least I was passionate about the nonprofit world, and I read that book from Peter Drucker, Managing Nonprofits
organizations, and it was kind of the Bible at the time. I was even thinking I want to run a nonprofit. So I ended not running any nonprofit in my time, unless we consider Scale Up Valley as a nonprofit. In a certain way, I think it's also a great effort for the benefit of the ecosystem. But anyway, I was referring to that book. But you were saying, yeah.
No, but the reason I was bringing up, because in the end goal is definitely to become, irrelevant, because the problems have been solved.
Exactly.
And that's the essence. But obviously, to be able to fund that, you need funding. No, so part of the dream of this is not only how does a nonprofit either eradicate the problem as a whole, and if they can't eradicate the problem, at least become self-sustaining, so they can actually address the problem for a longer period. No, so it's either becoming self-sustaining or solving the problem. No, in the ideal world, you solve the problem, there's no problem, and that's it. So in this case, it's a problem that's going to be solved in different ecosystems at any time. So we feel that's going to be a problem that I don't think that our mission will ever be completely done per se. I mean, there's always going to be new markets in which we can develop. But the one thing is, how do you fund this? No, so that's when Endeavor Catalyst came along. So for the first 15 years, as you said, 25 years of operating Endeavor, for the first 15 years, we operated Endeavor as the nonprofit that it is. But we were not thinking about any other sources of revenue except for the traditional one. So we're funding and doing a gala and getting donations and grants and all of that. No, yeah. But 10 years ago, came up with the idea of, and this is prior to my time. So when I say we, I'm speaking of the general we. It was Endeavor that came up with the idea of setting up a fund. And the reality of the fund is that the fund's mission would be to make us self-sustaining in the long term. No, and with that in mind, what we did is we analyzed what the portfolio of Endeavor entrepreneurs could be if we would have set up a fund prior to the year that we launched it. No, and we realized that we could have actually picked some of the most successful companies. No, we had companies that had IPO, that had exited, and there were meaningful events. And then again, of course, we were very happy for the entrepreneurs. We were very happy for the story, but it didn't really impact our bottom line. No, so what we did is we kind of put our money where our mouth is, and we decided, wait, why don't we set up a fund? But if we set up a fund, we need to set up a fund that can't be conflicting with what we're doing. So we need to still respecting the mission. So what we did is we set up Endeavor Catalyst, which is a co-investing tool that operates in parallel to Endeavor. It exists it exists essentially for Endeavor, no, and because of Endeavor, no, but it's generating its pipeline through the Endeavor portfolio. So we select entrepreneurs as a nonprofit. They go through the process, they become selected, and once they're selected, if they raised a $5 million round, and if it's led by an institutional investor, we will automatically co-invest one part of the round. No, so an Endeavor entrepreneur, institutional investment led, and $5 million plus round. No, and a series of other small funds, but the reality is that it's a rules-based fund. We don't want to be negotiating with the entrepreneur. We don't want to sit on their board unless the entrepreneur really wants us to. So basically what we do is we set this up in a way in which it doesn't generate any conflict with any of our entrepreneurs. And the same way, even if we're selecting entrepreneurs that are competing against each other, since we're rules-based, we might be invested in 7 or 8 different competitors. We're not about the sector. We're not about the segment. We're about the entrepreneur. No, so we will always abide by our rules. And it's interesting because this was launched 10 years ago, and we slowly see that the dream is working. No, and I think we're quite sure if we look at metrics and we look at portfolio and we look at how it's performed, that this dream will be a reality in the next few years. I mean, we have an objective in which in the next 6-7 years, 50% of our budget would be covered by the returns of our fund. No? And hopefully that will be so. You'll have the ups and downs of markets as always, but generally speaking, we should be able to be the first self-sustaining nonprofit. Fingers crossed on that one.
Absolutely. And just an analogy or a parallelism in a certain way, and at a very different scale. I like to say that. So if we would have exchanged all the services that scale-up leaders have paid to Scale-up Valley, we would be financially free at the moment, given the entrepreneurs that we supported along the way. So it's curious being a for-profit, and in the case of Endeavor, a non-profit, how the same rationale works.
You should see, I mean, you've been doing this for 9 years. I mean, you should see your own multiplier effect. I'm sure that it's also big.
Correct. Different scales, but definitely curious to learn from.
Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. And we didn't discuss something important when we talk about the fund, which is the thesis. So again, it's about scaling up in emerging markets. Any considerations on the thesis when Endeavor Catalyst invests?
So we're sector agnostic. Again, we wanted to create an arm that wouldn't conflict with anything that we're doing
right.
from the profit side. So what we do, we respect the selection process and the criteria for selecting the entrepreneurs, sector agnostic from all the regions, etc. If they meet the marks, we will automatically invest.
Got it. When you say they meet the marks, is they are classified kind of as a skill up, and then they are eligible to be an Endeavor member, and so they are eligible to be invested by the fund. That's kind of the rationale.
So explaining it in our terms, is we need to select them as an Endeavor entrepreneur. The selection process can last anywhere between 9 months to 2 years. So they have to go through the process of selection. Once they're selected, if they meet the criteria, they automatically investment will kick in.
Got it. And this might be also a question that a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening to us might have in their minds, which is, how do we apply to Endeavor? Are we invited to apply? How does that process? How does that work?
So it's interesting. I mean, so in our markets in which we've been present for a longer time, we do have entrepreneurs coming to us and applying and proactively reaching out. In markets in which we're just opening or we have a lesser presence, we're still behind the entrepreneurs, and we're still going to the ecosystem events and figuring out. But we're always delighted to be able to welcome entrepreneurs. So we're always trying to look for those scale ups that are at the exact time in which we can actually make a difference, or we're bringing our value in that inflection point. So I'd say that if you're located in one of the 41 markets in which we're present, please reach out to one of your markets, or reach out to us, or reach out to anyone, myself included, and we'll always be gladly to be able to bridge that gap. But we always find that we have fascinating entrepreneurs all over the world, and we also are not only constrained by our geographical location, which means that we do cover certain areas from certain countries. So, for example, we do cover the broader Maghreb from Morocco and Algeria, and Tunisia. Sorry, so we do have our offices there that are actually covering the broader region, no? And the same thing would happen with Eastern European offices. So we could have a Croatian entrepreneur coming through Bulgaria, for example, no? And then we have another turn of that, which would be the diasporas, no? So we'd have entrepreneurs that are from a country, but they left and emigrated and set up the company in another country, no? So we have, and the most known diasporas might be the Lebanese, the Puerto Rican, or the Greek, but we have diasporas all over the world for all the countries. So we do have a lot of the entrepreneurs that we actually try to bring to the table as diaspora entrepreneurs, because they also have a huge impact in their local ecosystem. So we try to also reconnect them with their local ecosystem.
Something that it's quite amazing, and I see that you are quite active sharing the different stories of the community all over the world. So I think that you are almost every single day you share something about the community in different parts of the world, and you are in a very privileged position to be able to see so many great entrepreneurs, so many great startups solving amazing problems for society all over the world, and be able to see that impact and get to know different people, different startups, etc., etc. So it's always new every single day on your share. So what are some of the trends that you see? What are some of the stories that you'd like to highlight, both in emerging markets and also always in emerging markets, but in emerging markets within emerging regions, and in emerging markets within consider kind of more developed regions, that I don't like the expression, but I don't have a better one.
So it's interesting what you mentioned. Yes, so I've been working at Endeavor for 9 years now. I've been at my current role for the last 4. And the one thing I realized is the visibility of the things that we were seeing. And it was just impressive for me that it seemed I didn't have a thesis back then, but it seemed that there was something exciting going on every day in one of our Endeavor markets. And sure enough, I decided I was going to start posting things on LinkedIn just to be able to celebrate the successes that we were having in our different markets. And 2 years later, I've realized that yes, there is something exciting going on every day. Every day, there's something to announce. There's an M&A operation. There's an IPO. There's a round. There's someone that's been highlighted. There's the entrepreneur of the year for summer. So there's always something meaningful going on in one of our markets. No, and it's just been impressive to see that there's just so much activity going on. And sometimes I have to pick and choose because I mean there's so much going on that I have to pick what's the one story that I can focus on. No, because there are days in which we have 2 or 3. So that's the fascinating part. Of course, being present in 41 markets, and all the years that we've been present, we have a huge community of entrepreneurs. As far as trends go, I mean, it's been very interesting to see. I mean, everyone is now very gloomy about where the economy is and where it's heading and what's happening. But we have noticed that some of the best entrepreneurs, and this is historical data, but some of the best entrepreneurs come from these periods of crisis. And then we have still seen to date some amazing entrepreneurs still doing amazing things and still being able. So if you have an amazing idea and an amazing team, and you're still going to be able to get funding. I mean, so great companies are still funded. No, so we haven't seen a lack of funding activity in some of our markets, and it's impressive because our markets are essentially emerging markets. So you would think, oh, if any market were to suffer first, it would be the emerging markets, and it might be the case. But what we're seeing from our entrepreneurs is that they're actually still being able to attract the capital. No, obviously not the same, not the same pace, different valuations, etc. But great ideas are still being funded. And then the other thing, as far as trends go, we have seen an emergence in the last few months of a lot of great software companies, like local software companies that have emerged. A lot of them from our different affiliates have brought here, and then we've actually obviously seen a lot of clean tech and climate tech companies as well. So we're slowly seeing more and more of those. I'm assuming that we'll have an ample portfolio of those in years to come. No, so those are the trends. And then from a geography perspective, I hate to identify geographies because I always think that if I'm identifying one, I'm missing out on the other. No, we have 41. It's like having 41 children that you all love them the same. But I have been very, very impressed by the quality of some of the entrepreneurs that we've been seeing in some of our markets. I mean, I'm impressed by some of the things I'm seeing out of Vietnam, just because you don't expect it, but you see some amazing quality in very diverse sectors in Vietnam. There's obviously a lot of appetite and a lot going on in Mexico, so that's definitely an exciting market. And I think I'm stating the obvious in the Mexican case. No, but then it's also exciting to see what's going on in the Middle East. I mean, there's also there's no lack of stories, and if you look at my feed the last month or two, there's a lot of Middle Eastern stories, a lot of great Middle Eastern stories, and you think Middle East, wow. Well, yes, you have some amazing tech companies coming from Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, UAE, Saudi. It's really fascinating. So yeah, as I said, I wouldn't want to highlight one market versus another because I always feel that I'm doing a disservice to one. But I did give a couple of hints of things that I'm seeing. We're excited.
But maybe something that we can see. It's definitely, I think that's special for me. I was very aware of LATAM and Southeast Asia also because I've also worked in both regions in terms of emerging markets. And then of course Africa is always the promise of the future, but we are also seeing very good examples in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in South Africa, and I think that now what is more exciting is really this Middle East region that is exploding, right? So I think that in a certain way we are almost seeing what we saw some maybe a decade ago, which is Southeast Asia and LATAM becoming 2 superpowers in terms of emerging markets now happening in the Middle East. As you have a global exposure to so many markets and so many entrepreneurs, do you feel the same, the kind of interpretation that I'm making?
It is true, and I think that you do have a valid point. I think that there is still a lot to come from these markets. I mean, I look at LATAM, and also LATAM is such a big market. I mean, many times we go to LATAM when we're thinking about Mexico and Brazil, but we also have Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Peru. I mean, there's the reality, Ecuador.
And one of the most successful cases, Mercado Libre, comes from Argentina. No?
And Argentina is a fascinating case. It's a fascinating case for Mercado Libre, but it's a fascinating case for Globant, for Voila, for so many other companies as well, for Auth0. And what's impressive about Argentina, which I've seen in some other countries, but at the fewer, is that the diversity of sectors. You have these amazing companies that have become successful cases, IPO companies, valuations in the several billions, and many unicorns. But they're in very diverse sectors. You have cybersecurity, you have banking, you have e-commerce. You mentioned with Mercado Libre, you have software. So it's diverse sectors, and they're all coming from that one country. Because many times you can actually see sectors that are more or less similar or have a relationship within a country, and that is maybe not surprising. But when you see this diversity of sectors from one same country, that is really your jaw drops. No.
And I think it's kind of an effect in the case of Argentina. Maybe I'm being a little bit being very courageous to give this statement, but I do that. That's why I do a podcast, is to also to exchange and to challenge each other on different views and share fresh air about what we are seeing in the world. But it's the same effect that we see, for instance, in, like myself, I come from a small country, Portugal, with 10 million people. So we need to get abroad as quickly as possible. So we are not able to survive in the domestic market or to build a big business. It is possible, we have seen, but usually it's not an easy task, especially in tech, to build a business only the domestic market. So you get strong to go out very early in your internationalization process, and in a certain way, because the Argentinian market has always been so challenging that Argentinians needed to have a global outlook, and from day one start thinking, how do I grow? What is the next market? So they needed to work a lot on their resilience. In the opposite case, of course, Brazilian is a very challenging market as well to build a big business. It's becoming better and better and better. But the good thing is that if you are able to do it just in Brazil, you are able to create a big player there. Right?
For sure. And I mean, at the end, no one ever wants a crisis, but in the case of Argentina, the constant crisis has been a blessing in disguise, no? Because it's forced them to be resilient, it's forced them to think outside, it's forced them, but it's fascinating to see, you know? And you're absolutely right as far with Brazil as well. I mean, the same thing. I mean, you have such a market size that you could be you could be incredibly successful just addressing your local market now, and I feel that there are very few markets in the world in which you could actually make that case. No,
exactly. So it makes me think also about the cases of small markets. And I think that we always have this point. So the large domestic markets have a hard time going global because, of course, they are able to build a very big player in their own markets. The smallest economies are able to produce more global players like Israel, Singapore, even Portugal at another scale, Sweden. When we are seeing also Switzerland, also Denmark, also creating a dance in the universe. And I think that this is one of the reasons why there are some countries that are able to build more global players or less global players. I also like the discussion of in Southeast Asia and both also in LATAM and in the Middle East and other emerging markets is how do we build big global players, right? So usually the dream is always, I want to be the Southeast Asian leader, I want to be the LATAM leader, I want to be the Middle East leader. Or I think that's in Europe is an exception now because the majority of the European ventures want to expand into the US and the Iberian to go into LATAM, but it's really how do we come back to the roots of entrepreneurship, which is how do we build a global problem and how do we make it available at a global scale, like Endeavor is doing for instance, even as a nonprofit.
And that's what we love. We love to see these companies that come from markets that are completely under the radar, and developing. I mean, you see entrepreneurs from Tunisia, you entrepreneurs from Ecuador, and these are or Lebanon or Jordan. These are Uruguay, and you see these are small markets. And you look at them, and you were talking about Portugal yourself. I mean, but you see these small markets in which you don't think that they could actually, and yes, they can. And not only that, they can do it, and they can do it in a very agile way, very resourceful, with the same exact benefits as they've done it in any other major hub. And that's the fascinating thing to see. These players that are coming from markets that are completely under the radar, and that's what we feel that our role is. Our role is there to bridge that gap. No, we're trying to figure out. Those companies are going to be there. They're going to exist. The entrepreneurs are for sure there. Let's figure out a way in which we can actually provide them the support so that they can actually build that global thing and not have to worry about local and domestic hurdles.
Right. And the grit and the anger and also having access. And I'm seeing this. We know that the pre-seed and angel rounds are much more common, very close to home for obvious reasons, because that's all about the entrepreneur. at the time there is only kind of a PowerPoint or MVP or a vision or a dream and nothing else. And it will iterate and ensure that the pitch that the entrepreneur is making will be super different in 1 year or in 6 months or in 3 months after. So in a certain way, I'm also seeing that angels are coming already from different regions, or at least from different countries, and pre-seed rounds as well becoming more regional at least, and even in some cases already global, which I think it's a very healthy sign, and is again leveling the play field. So as a Portuguese entrepreneur, giving again the example, I can raise funds in the US straight away if I'm building a company in the US, and I don't need to first build my MVP in Portugal. That will not be the market that I will scale. Then maybe consider Spain to expand, or maybe go up to the UK, and you would have to have some financial muscle to do that movement, and then move into the US, or go from Spain and then move into Mexico or Colombia. So there is a lot of steps that the entrepreneur needs to make before getting into the main market where the entrepreneur wants to scale up. And I think that the pre-seed rounds being more globalized, it is having a multiplier effect at the time. At least that's what I'm seeing.
No, you're spot on. I mean, it's interesting. When we are mapping our multiplier effects, we normally do them at a local level, no? And we do them either sectorial or national, but it's always local. And the one thing that we've seen is that many of our entrepreneurs, they have broader impact internationally, but we can't capture that. We haven't been able to historically capture that. We're now going to be capturing that more and more. But it's interesting that it's what you say, that multiplier effect is now happening at more of a regional and global level. It's not happening only at a domestic level. It does happen, of course, at a local level, but it's now starting to happen more and more internationally, both regionally and internationally and globally, you know. And that's actually it's a good sign of how, you know, these ecosystems are so
interconnected, right? And even we see the angels from different countries joining to fund the venture, VCs as well, and becoming less competitive in between them. Also making more alliances to bet on a certain investment. At another side, let's say also that it's good to see that if there is more supply, there is also more competition, which is good for the entrepreneur, that is able to choose a little bit better. As in the past, it was much more the investors choosing the entrepreneur. But it's curious to see there is much more demand and much more supply, but still everyone wants the most promising ones. So there will always be a fight for those ones.
Yeah.
Any final comments or that you'd like to share about what would look like the next 10 years for Endeavor? How do you see the future of the ecosystem before we get into the final quick question and answer?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, as far as the future, obviously we've set up Endeavor Catalyst, which is our self-sustaining fund. So we're betting a lot on that. We're positive it's going to work. I mean, it's already been showing that it's proving that it will. But we're still in the early days. I mean, we launched this first fund barely 10 years ago. So, and our most successful or meaningful fund to date is the one that we just closed a few months ago. So it's a close to $292 million fund, which we just announced in July. So we're going to be starting to see the results of that in a few years. But that's the future of how we can be self-sustaining. The future of us from a selection perspective is we will still be very strategic about the markets in which we want to expand. As I mentioned, we have been expanding in the last few years, and we're still expanding at a pace of opening 1 to 2 markets a year. So you'll still see a bit more of Endeavor. As you said at the beginning, we're not yet everywhere, but we're trying to see where we can actually be present, where the model makes sense. So the future for us right now, we feel it looks bright. I think that we can be present in more markets, and I definitely think that the Catalyst will have a very important say in how we're going to be self-sustaining in years to come.
Love it. Love that vision. Again, you helped me to remind myself of that green book from Peter Drucker. I still remember myself close to the pool, reading the book and daydreaming about my future. I would never imagine that I would be leading Skillet Valley in the next 10 years. So let's go into the last segment of the show where I ask you a quick question and you give me a brief answer. So let's start with the free self-reflective questions about your life. So if you'd have the opportunity to meet Adrian 9 years ago, when you were joining Endeavor and having a coffee with your young Adrian, what advice would you offer to your younger self?
Wow, it's a good one. I guess that the best advice I'd give myself would be what we all know, but I think with age, it's all about people. It's all about people. I mean, it's not about oneself. It's not about how you manage. It's not about your ego. It's about dealing with people, managing people, inspiring people, and working and connecting with people. So I would tell my younger self, you know, when you're given responsibilities at the job, it's not because you're a genius. It's because you're working well with a team. You're knowing how to set up a team. You're knowing how to lead that team. But I would say it's down to that. So I would always go down to just be true to the people part of the job, because that's the one. That's the simplest part and the most important one. So
love it. Great point. What are you the most proud of on your journey so far?
I mean, what am I most proud of? I don't know. I mean, I'm very, very, very proud of my family. So I guess, and that's in my personal journey. In my work journey, I'm very proud that I've been able to do what I'm doing now, which I do with passion. But I guess essentially also being able to build up my network, but not only building up my network, but being able to build up my network with the purpose of being able to support the people in my network. And at the end of the day, it's being a connector, no? And I love being able to connect, and I love being able to hear these stories of someone I connected with, someone that gave them a job, and someone I connected with, someone that became a board member, or someone that I connected with, someone that became the co-founder of their company, you know? And all of these cases are true, are real cases of things that I've been able to do. And some of them I've been able to do mainly at Endeavor, which allows me to do that. And some of them I've been able to do because I feel that I'm, as Malcolm Gladwell says, I think I'm a natural connector. No, so that's like if that was my magic power, I think would be connecting people. No, so
love it. So you are in the right chair, definitely. So multicultural experience and being able to connect and build networks. So well done. Worst advice ever received?
That's a good question. Worst advice I ever received. I mean, the typical thing of that you always get advice on what your career and do what you're passionate about and everything. I mean, it is true that you have to do what you're passionate about, but I think you have to learn your way until you know what that passion is and where it lies at the intersection of, you know, what they always say about what you're good at, what you get paid for, and what makes an impact.
The ikigai.
Yeah, the famous ikigai. But the reality is that when you're being told that at a very young age, I think that it can be very misleading. No, so I think that it is true. The passion should be there. Yeah, but I think that should be something that you have to gain with experience. I think that there's things that you have to do. You have to go through different boot camps of life. I think that everything that I've done in the past, I do not regret. I mean, working in finance, working in media, all of my jobs led me to where I am today. And maybe if I would have done what I was passionate about on the year one, I might have not gone to the areas in which I did. No, so I do feel that life is a bit of a boot camp. Definitely do things that you like, that you enjoy, but I do think that you will gradually find your passions. No, so when I was very early on being told, do what you're passionate about, it's kind of like, well, I still have to learn. I have to learn about myself. I have to learn what life is and what the passions are. No, and myself in the 20s. When that advice was given to me, I think that it was actually lost in the.
It makes me think of that famous sentence from Steve Jobs: "You are only able to connect the dots looking backwards, right? So you need to trust that you are on the right path." And definitely, if we look into your LinkedIn and into your career and the journey that you just shared, it seems that every step of your career was preparing you to become the president of Endeavor. And I'm sure that we don't know what will come next. And of course, being the president of Endeavor will prepare you to do something I would not say even more impactful, but at least equally impactful to society, right? So cool to see that as well. As you said, in financial service, then marketing, then economist, etc. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because nowadays you need to be a great public speaker. You need to be able to understand different regions. You need to be able to be a connector. So you need to be able to build to lead a large organization, a large team with multicultural aspects. So if you didn't have that experience, you were not ready to do what you are doing today. Another reflection, right, is are you at any time ready to do what is our next challenge? I think that sometimes we also need to go out of our comfort zone, right?
I think that anything that we do that gets us out of our comfort zone is the right way to go about things. I mean, and you were mentioning, looked at my LinkedIn, and it's a bit of all over the place, but it was always finding things that were completely out of my comfort zone. I mean, there might be some similarities to what I did, but it was always something that was very, very different. It was setting up a nonprofit in Spain. It was going to work in communications in a financial services firm when I was doing media. It's doing media when you come. So it was always something that was completely new and always very new and very frightening because you're doing something new and you want to prove that you can do it right. But yeah, it's getting out of your comfort zone. I think that's what really makes a difference in life. No?
And finally, the resources. Your favorite book, business, non-business. This is much more a segment to get to know more about our guests. So feel free.
I mean, look, the Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, I just referred, is actually a great book, just because I feel I identify the connector, but it's very good at being able to differentiate the different people and being able to tell you more about those social interaction and social networks. No, and then obviously I'd be remiss if I didn't mention there's a book that our founder Linda Rotenberg wrote, was as crazy as a compliment. It's also a great book because it actually tells you the story about entrepreneurship in emerging markets. No, so anyone that's interested on that, I would definitely, because it's a fun book. You learn about Endeavor, obviously, but you learn a lot about entrepreneurship, and especially entrepreneurship and emerging markets.
Great addition to the resource list. Favorite movie or series?
Oof, that's a hard one. Favorite movie or series. I mean, I've always considered myself very much of a Star Wars fan, so I'd say the Star Wars series. And I got my kids into that. I know it doesn't sound too. It's not too intellectual, no. But actually,
it is. I think that the Star Wars movies have a lot of reflection.
They do,
and usually the kids are having fun. And the adults are thinking about the similarities, about the stories that are embedded in Star Wars. So I think it is an intellectual choice. And finally, your favorite podcast, excluding this one.
No, I'd say, I mean, I'd have to go. There's several, but the one by excellence would be Masters of Scale. I'm biased because Reid Hoffman sits on our board, but I think it's just such an amazing,
it's a very good one.
It's a great one. And this one, but I can't say this one, so I'll say
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much for making the time, Adrian. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show.
Mike, thanks again for having me.
And to our community, we keep bringing you the best of the best to make your life a little bit easier, from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100. See you soon, and keep scaling.